have an active shooter. We have an active shooter inside the fairgrounds.
Welcome to Active Shooter, a podcast that covers the whys, the hows, and the aftermath of active shooter and mass casualty events.
They have an active shooter in the building. A second call says they are being attacked.
I've been shot. 1692 means we got shots fired. 4:15 ASF. Route 291 sounded like an automatic firearm.
Thank you for listening.
Active shooter, reports of an active shooter
with mass casualty incidents.
You are listening to Active Shooter, a podcast that may contain adult themes, explicit language, and graphic depictions of violence. Portions of this show may be traumatic for those under 18. Listener discretion is advised.
Active Shooter, the podcast, is a High Five Holly production, and I'm your host, JT. All the cases we cover are tragic. Especially tragic are those involving children. Taking the lives of small, innocent children is senseless and incomprehensible. In today's episode, 15 children and one teacher lose their lives at the hands of a madman. He was mad at some of the parents and adults in the community because, according to him, they had ruined his life. Because they upset him, he decided to take what was most precious to them, their children.
Evil visited us yesterday, and we don't know why. We don't understand it, and I guess we never will.
If you've listened to our prior episodes, you know that the Active Shooter podcast team has taken the no notoriety pledge, and we will not be sharing the real name of the shooters that we cover. We will be giving the shooters a pseudonym, and refer to them by that name throughout the episode. This will help in clearing up any confusion in the story, while remaining true to our pledge in not naming the shooter by their actual name. In today's episode, we will be referring to the shooter as Mike. March 13th, 1996, 8:15 a.m., Stirling, Scotland. Mike was seen by a neighbor scraping ice off his white van at his residence located on Kent Road. When the van had warmed up and the ice had been scraped from the windows, Mike drove about 5 miles north to Dunblane. It was 9:30 a.m. when Mike parked his van in the lower parking lot of Dunblane Primary School next to a telephone pole. He proceeded to exit his vehicle and snip the wires on the telephone pole in an attempt to cut off communication to and from the school. What Mike didn't know, however, was that these wires were connected to the nearby homes and didn't have any effect on the school at all. Mike started making his way towards the school, wearing a dark jacket, black corduroy pants, a woolly hat, and earmuffs. Underneath his jacket, he was wearing 4 holsters around his waist, carrying 2 9mm Browning semi-automatic pistols and 2 .357 Smith & Wesson revolvers. Mike entered the school through an entrance near the school's gymnasium. He had decided before he made his way to the school to avoid the main entrance, as he didn't want anyone to see him entering. Having started at 9 a.m., classes were already in session at Dunblane Primary School. A primary class of 28 children was making their way to the gym for physical education class. The class was called Primary 1, the equivalent of kindergarten in the United States. In total, 1 teacher, 45-year-old Gwen Mayer, 25 5-year-old students, and 3 6-year-old students were in the group.
So we just started the warm-up, and that's when it happened. Literally, I would say about 5 minutes into the lesson. I was quite near the door, and he came through the door, a glass door, just banged the door right open. And from the moment he approached the adults first, and he walked towards me and started shooting.
The students were anxious to get started with their physical education class, as it was a favorite for a majority of them. The small children greeted their physical education teacher, Mrs. Eileen Harold, and her assistant, Mrs. Mary Blake, and gathered in the middle of the gym. What the students and teachers didn't realize was that there was a very, very dangerous man just outside the gymnasium doors who was about to wreak havoc within their primary school. Mike entered through the doors and fired a couple random shots. One shot into the stage of the assembly hall, and one into the girls' bathroom. He then entered the gym. Out of nowhere, without saying a word, Mike started firing the revolver in rapid succession. Instinctively, Miss Eileen Harold threw her arms up in front of her chest in an effort to protect herself. She was struck in each of her forearms, right hand, and left breast. The student's teacher, Gwen Mayer, was shot numerous times and died instantly. The first 29 shots were fired from the entrance of the gymnasium without Mike even moving. After firing the 29 shots, he walked into the gym and fired an additional 6 shots, and then 8 shots more across towards the opposite side of the gym. Mike then made his way to the middle of the gym and fired 16 more shots. Many of the students had laid on the ground in fear, as there was little to no protection inside the gym. It was one big open room. Mike stood over various students, shooting them at point-blank range. Finally, he left the gym and fired 4 more shots towards the library, injuring a library staff member. He fired numerous shots towards doorways and fire escapes.
Well, we didn't know what was going on. We weren't allowed to know. And when I was going to the toilet, when we were allowed out only to go to the toilet, I saw these gunshots in the gym window. And we didn't know really what was going on. And someone told me that Mrs. Harold had been shot, and that's all I knew in school.
One teacher had heard the shots and immediately told her student to get down on the floor, quite possibly saving all the students in the classroom. A bullet struck a chair where a student had been sitting just seconds prior. Mike decided to go back into the gym, where he had created complete bloodshed. He dropped the revolver he was using to the ground, retrieved his other revolver from the holster around his waist, put the cold muzzle into his mouth, pointed the gun upwards, and pulled the trigger. Mike laid alive and twitching on the floor for a brief moment until he took his last breath. In total, Mike killed 15 children and 1 teacher, and there were a total of 58 gunshot wounds between the injured and killed victims.
The children were traumatized. The ones who were injured but still conscious were distressed. We managed to get those out fairly quickly because it was just an appalling scene.
The first 911 call came through at 9:43 a.m. Because the shooting itself only lasted a total of 3 minutes, Mike had already killed himself by the time police were on the scene at 9:50 a.m.
The police were very quickly on the scene, and together we tried to identify those who were still alive and whose wounds could possibly be treated.
At 9:57 a.m., the first ambulance arrived and left for Sterling Royal Infirmary, with the first gunshot wound victim at 10:15 a.m. It would continue to make trips back and forth from the school to the hospital, and by 11:10 a.m., all injured victims had successfully been transported to the infirmary.
When the phone call came in and said that there had been a shooting at Dunblane Primary School, we didn't believe it at first, and then ran into the gym and we saw the devastation that was there. It was more or less taking a big deep breath, going into auto drive and carrying on what we had to do.
It was the children lying on the floor, basically looked as if they were sleeping. And it's the 1 or 2 children that we were dealing with in the storeroom kept going back to this one wee boy. I don't know if that was my point of connection, but just kept going back to him to make sure he was okay, until such times as we could get an ambulance up to take him away.
Eileen and some of the students who were injured in the massacre had hidden in a small storage closet on the side of the gym. Mary Blake, the physical education teacher's assistant, managed to get to a closet to hide and prevent further injury, despite being shot in the head and both of her legs. Miraculously, she survived.
My only child, Amy Hutchison, was shot in the knee on Wednesday whilst in her gym class. Amy is 5 years old. The doctors operated on Amy again yesterday, and we're all pleased that she's doing well, although she's still in a lot of pain. All our family are finding it really difficult to believe that this tragedy happened in Dunblane. Most of the families involved knew each other, and the children were all friends. The hospital staff have been wonderful, and I'd like to thank each and every one of them from the bottom of my heart.
The head teacher of Dunblane Primary School, Ron Taylor, would never get the images of the gymnasium out of his head. Blood spattered everywhere. The pools of blood soaked the floor. Ron had seen where Mike lay, twitching on the floor, and he walked over and kicked the revolver out of his hand in case Mike was able to fire additional shots.
The scene that met us in the hall in the gym was just utterly appalling and one's worst nightmare. I can't get the images out of my head yet, and I think that will take some time. It was an appalling mess.
Ron Taylor felt enormous guilt he wasn't able to save the victims of the massacre, and has been dealing with that grief and guilt for the remainder of his life. He never returned to teaching. Due to time constraints, we will not be able to discuss all of the victims that lost their lives at Dunblane Primary School. To read more about the victims, click the link in the show notes. Little Charlotte Dunn was 5 years old and had just moved to Scotland about 9 months before the shooting with her mom, Barbara, and dad, Martin. She also had a little brother named Alex, who was 3 years old at the time of the shooting. Martin and Barbara were the last parents told their child died in the massacre, and were required to go to the hospital to identify their daughter's body, something no parent should ever have to do. Charlotte loved her teacher, and looked forward to going to school every day. Though Charlotte was shy, she had a lot of friends, and got along with everyone. She was very clever, and loved The Lion King. Victoria Elizabeth Clydesdale was also 5 years old when she lost her life. She was very close to missing school that day due to a rash she had. Victoria begged her mom to let her go to school because they had gym class, her favorite subject. Her mom allowed Victoria to go to school. Victoria was originally from Drummond Rise and spent her first term of primary school at St. Andrews in Orkney. An astonishing 300 people attended Victoria's funeral. Sophie Jane Lockwood North was born on October 2nd, 1990, making her just 5 years old. She had huge, brown, sparkling eyes, and beautiful dark hair straight as a pin. Just 2 years prior to the shooting, Sophie's mom passed away due to breast cancer. Sophie was just 3 years old. After her mother's death, Sophie and her dad developed an unbreakable bond that no one could sever. Or so he thought. After Sophie's father lost them both, he started a charity in Sophie's name that provides funds to breast cancer research, children's hospice, anger management programs, and conflict resolution programs. 45-year-old Gwen Mayer was born in 1951 and had worked at Dunblane Primary School for 10 years. Emergency personnel reported that based on her position when she died, she was attempting to shield the students from gunfire. She grew up in Great Harwood and was married to Rodney Mayer. Rodney and Gwen had 2 beautiful daughters named Esther and Deborah. After their daughters were born in the early 1970s, the family moved to Scotland. Shortly after the shooting, Gwen was given the award Scotswoman of the Year for her bravery and courage during the shooting. In 1997, she was awarded the Queen's Commendation for bravery in the birthday honors.
Gwen was highly respected, very experienced, lovely lady. The kids loved her. We've lost a super colleague and a friend.
Dunblane, Scotland is a beautiful little town with a population of around 8,800 people. It is known for being a wealthy town built on the banks of the Allan Water. People from all over the world travel to Dunblane to view its most prominent landmark, the Dunblane Cathedral.